I understand a couple of days ago that Reverend Jessie Jackson chose to endorse Hillary Clinton for the office of president. I wanted to take a minute to direct your attention to the upper left-hand corner of the page here. This is a search that is done on Clinton Digital Library. The particular article can be found at clinton.presidentiallibraries.us/items/show/48869. You can, if you can't find it there, go to Clinton Digital Library, look under Browse Collections, All Collections, and look for a collection on Donald J. Trump. When you click on that, there's going to be another link at the top. You can click on that and it'll take you to all of the various documents or files that were listed under Donald J. Trump. Apparently there was might have been some concern as to whether or not Donald J. Trump may have considered running for president back then, but obviously he did not. Anyway, what I'm going to look at, we're going to look at an article that is dated March the 19th of 93 through December 6th of 2000, a series of documents all on this one PDF. And we're going to go to page 53 out of 84 pages. And specifically, this is a White House press briefing that Reverend Jessie Jackson gave. And I'm not going to go to the top of the article. We're going to start down further down on that article to a question about Representative Gephardt. The question from the interviewer is, Representative Gephardt said recently that the White House and moderate Democrats did not seem to have an activist enough agenda for the Democratic Party. Do you agree with that, and what would you like to see Democrats do? Reverend Jackson responds and says, well, Democrats in the White House all too often have adjusted to our environment, and we at Rainbow Push are serving as the catalyst. After all, the Democrats did not have an active enough agenda in Montgomery in 1995, but we served as a catalyst. And the best of leadership responded to the legitimacy of our request. And he goes on and he goes to talk about the party not being activist enough in 63, and this is that particular comment. The party was not activist enough in 63, and we marched on Washington. We, and signifies that Jackson is referring to himself as been involved in that particular march on Washington. He says, but they responded because Dr. King made the choice between Bull Connor and Dr. King. The party did not have an activist enough agenda on the right to vote. I remember, Jackson is referring to himself, recalling to mind a conversation between Dr. King and Lyndon Johnson. Basically, he's indicating that he was at that particular meeting. He says, I remember Dr. King saying to Lyndon Johnson after getting the Nobel Peace Prize, we thank you, Dr. King, for doing great work, and we honor you. He said, well, thank you, Mr. Johnson, but we deserve the right to vote. And Johnson said, you know, I like you very much and I respect you very much, but I can't give you the right to vote unilaterally. I can't. And if I were to do it, we would lose the South for 25 years. He said, but the bad news is, I can't, but the Congress won't. Now, the interesting thing about this is this has been buried in the Clinton presidential libraries, going back as far as, I believe it was 1998 when this particular White House press briefing took place. And for the last 18 years, this particular discussion, this particular press briefing has been buried and long forgotten. And it is something that has not been passed down to newer voters. Newer voters need to understand that denying civil rights to black Americans was not at all entirely a conservative Republican issue. Here, this press briefing that Reverend Jackson gave very clearly lays out that a Democratic president refused to give the right to vote to blacks because he was concerned about losing the white vote in the South for 25 years. Politics was more important than the civil rights of black Americans. Now, this has been sitting in the Clinton presidential library ever since it was built, and the Clintons have had this in their personal files since Bill was in office, and it's just been forgotten. It's always nice to have a reminder. It's always nice to show that sometimes you're not exactly told the truth. This is one of those times. But what's really interesting is you also have to look at Reverend Jackson. Reverend Jackson remembers these conversations. Reverend Jackson remembers this particular interview. And Reverend Jackson stood side by side with some of these other civil rights activists and civil rights leaders and kept his mouth shut, publicly kept his mouth shut about the disgraceful conduct of the Democratic Party when it came to the right to vote. That they, the Democratic Party, were racist. And Jesse Jackson stood there at all of these riots alongside other civil rights leaders and kept his mouth shut to all of these young voters who do not know the truth about their own party. Well, there it is, in a nutshell. And then we can also talk about Governor George Wallace, who was also a Democrat, and how he refused to allow black school children to intermingle in schools with white school children. But that's another story, and we'll talk about it another day. Thank you, and good day.